Hello, welcome to another Games Accessibility Conference panel. This one is all about disabled devs and the industry, basically. My name is Chris Goodyear. I am the founder of Manycat Studio, and I do a lot of freelance work as well. And joining me today is some very talented developers from across the world, so I'm very excited to talk to them all. Starting with Felicia, do you want to just do a quick intro to you?
Hello, I'm Felicia Pren. I'm a player experience specialist at Next Games here in Helsinki. I am also an accessibility advocate and consultant, and before this, I was a producer outside of the game industry. I also do radio.
Ooh, I did some university radio, so I'm excited by that.
Nice.
Brian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. I'm Brian Marquez. I'm an associate producer at Raven Software, a subsidiary of Activision, working on Call of Duty Warzone. I'm also an accessibility advocate, and just, I guess, if we're talking about other things that we do as well, I am also an artist and publish comic books on the side.
Awesome.
And last but not least, it's Laura.
Hi, yeah. So I'm Laura, and I've had 2 years worth of experience in QA. I've worked for 505 Games and recently the Multiplayer Guys. And I'm also like a freelance writer on the side as well. I've worked for like tons of publications like PlayStation Magazine, Eurogamer, and Guardian, to name a few.
I am definitely in awe of everybody. I'm very impressed that you've all taken the time to come and talk about basically disabilities and the role it can play in the workplace and that. So I think the first sort of question I really want to ask is about how you got into games and more specifically the roles that you do now. So I'm going to throw that again to Felicia first. So how did you get into your job?
So this is super random. When I was a teenager, I really wanted to work in the music industry, and I played a lot of video games. I've played games my whole life, actually, but I never imagined that I would work on games. I always thought games were made in Japan. Like I had this weird idea in my head that all the video games came from
Yeah, I
Japan.
thought that as well.
And so I'm not Japanese, so I was just like, all right, I guess I can't make video games. And then I moved to Finland from the US about 10 years ago, and I bumped into the man who would become my boss at an Irish pub one night, and I was unemployed, and I was like, hey, you should hire me. And he was like, well, what do you do? And I was like, I don't know, I do everything. What do you need? Which was like the worst way to sell myself ever. But apparently it worked because he's like, well, I need someone to handle our communications. I used to work in the UK. I need someone who speaks English natively to work with our British partners. At the time, it was just an animation studio who focused on 3D. So I started out just handling the external communications with our British partners, and the company started to pivot more towards mobile games, and it became pretty clear that I was good at producing, so I became a producer, and I worked my way up to being the second in command at the company, and the rest is history. When Corona hit, unfortunately, things got a little bit difficult, and I started to look for something a little bit more stable that didn't rely so heavily on outsourcing. And well, now I'm at Next Games and I'm super excited to be there. So that's my story.
Amazing, really amazing. Brian, how did you come into your job role in the games industry?
Yeah, so I'm also a huge gamer. I've been playing games since literally as far as I can remember. The first console I ever played was a Super Nintendo. I don't know if that ages me at all, but I'm not.
Same.
Yeah. And it's literally been history since then. I actually didn't go to school for gaming at first, though. I actually went to school for pre-med. I was trying to go into medical school, and I realized how much I absolutely hated it. And then I was like, well, what's another thing I really enjoy? And then I looked around my bedroom at the time and noticed I had walls and walls full of video game memorabilia. So I was like, oh, well, that's probably a good fit. So yeah, I went into games dev. I actually wanted to go into art. I wanted to be a character designer, hence why I mentioned earlier I do comic book art and stuff on the side. But then I found out I was better at producing, and that's just kind of how I got into it. But when I graduated college, though I had like some knowledge just from my college experience, I actually started in QA, as most people do in entry-level game dev positions. with Adult Swim Games in Atlanta, Georgia. So
So cool.
I worked on a lot of properties with them, mostly Rick and Morty and stuff like that. I also worked with Cartoon Network games, so a lot of Steven Universe games and stuff like that as well. And recently, just a couple months ago, I joined the team at Activision, and now work at Call of Duty Warzone as a producer there.
Amazing.
Forgive me for my fangirl moments over here. I'm sorry. I'm in awe.
Laura, what about you? How did you come into testing and that?
Well, for me, I kind of sort of like stumbled into it. I just randomly found it on the Facebook group called Black Girl Gamers. I found like a job posting for a QA tester at 505 Games in that group, and I applied for it, and then I ended up getting it, and then it became this like really unexpected journey. And then during that time as well, I managed to like get some freelance commissions for different publications. But so those included like Official PlayStation Magazine, Eurogamer, Guardian, and Den of Geek, all sorts of like geeky related stuff. And then I kind of just used the skills, and then that kind of took me into the job with the multiplayer guys, and then I'm still freelancing on the side as well.
I'm in awe because I'm just like, wow, if this is you at the start of your career, I can only imagine what you're going to be in like 5 years' time.
You're gonna become a rock star. I can already tell. going from writing to what you do is like, you have ambition.
I do hope to get into like writing, probably like narrative design, and lots of like fictional writing as well. You know, I'm just interested in like exploring different areas of the industry.
Yeah, I think I've had a similar experience where the first official games job that I had was a QA tester at TT Games, and that sort of helped me learn like the different roles and the development cycle and sort of where I felt like I would best be suited to, like what I enjoyed the most. And it's sort of an amazing sort of feeling to be like, oh yeah, actually I feel like I'd be great at doing that sort of down the road of like producing and running my own thing, which is why I started ManyCats, because I was just like, I kind of had that independent flair in me that I was like, oh, I like doing my own things, sort of. And I knew that there was a lot of work still out there to do for people with disabilities when it comes to the games industry, specifically in careers and making games. And I just didn't want to wait around. I was like, why wait? If something needs to happen, let's do it now. And that's why sort of it spurred me on to go to do ManyCats. Luckily, these days I get to do panels like this, talking about the talented disabled developers that are out there, as well as sort of doing, like I said, freelance gigs at companies like Italic Pig or like Rogue Sun, and working on some really cool titles with them. So I just feel sort of blessed that I'm coming into my own in the games industry. It can take a little bit of time, can't it? But you get there in the end. So talk. Obviously, we've all had different experiences coming into our jobs and that, and it sounds like we've all had different experiences of how we got said job, whether that's going through traditional recruitment processes or crying at someone till they gave us the job.
You don't have to call me out like that.
I named no names. But I was wondering what your thoughts are currently in the industry, how the recruitment process is for disabled developers, or the next generation of young disabled people or neurodiverse people that want to get in the industry. Are we doing well when it comes to recruitment, or how we do recruitment, or do you think it should be something that we really need to revamp and adapt?
So this is an interesting topic for me, and I'm going to take the lead on this one, I think, because I am a board member of an association here in Finland called We in Games, which advocates for more diversity and inclusion in the game industry. So this is something I deal with on a regular basis. And obviously I was unemployed for a little bit of time, so I got to firsthand experience as a somewhat qualified disabled person the job hunting grind. And what I can say is that I definitely think that the attitudes towards disabled people, at least in Finland, are changing. And not to toot my own horn, but a lot of that is because of things I've done, which feels really weird. But since I am pretty much the only loud disabled person in the Finnish game industry, I've given a lot of talks and lectures about working with disabled teammates and why you should not fear us and why we are an essential part of any development process, and why we should be seen for our skills and not necessarily just for our disabilities. So for me, I never felt like in my journey as an unemployed person to a now employed person that I was being judged based on anything but my skills. There were times in interviews where people asked things that they maybe should not have asked, but in those instances, I understood that it was more of a curiosity rather than an inherently malicious thing, if that makes any sense. So I think it's come up because people are genuinely curious, not because they were judging whether or not I was capable of doing my job. So I could understand how some people might be really uncomfortable with that, and I'm not even entirely sure if that's legal, but it has happened, and at least the way it was phrased when it has happened, I wasn't bothered by it. As far as the younger generation goes, I definitely think it's getting better, like I said, and I want to believe that thanks to my work and the work of many people like me, that attitudes are starting to change and that recruiters especially are starting to not be as afraid. I think the internet has helped with this. I think movements for equality and diversity have helped with this. I think open dialogue, especially about neurodivergency, has helped with this. So I think we're going in a better direction, but I can only talk about Finland.
Laura, you're quite new to your current role, aren't you? Did you feel that the recruitment process for yourself has ever sort of acknowledged what your needs were?
I think going through like the recruitment process, really, I think it was just important to I think because always for me personally, it's always really difficult to disclose disabilities. I just always feel like it's a slippery slope for me. So that's kind of like the obstacle that I have in regards to like recruitment and like going through like the interview process and like the recruitment process.
Yeah, I totally feel the same way as you. Like, it's taken a while, as even as an adult going into my 30s. Like, it's taken me a while to gain confidence to be like, for this interview, I need you to do this. I need you to, be in a quiet area. I need you to focus into the camera and show me your lips so I can lip read. It's taken a while.
I get that.
I
get that because I have my eye movement, and like I can pretend to be normal up until they see my eyes, and then I feel like that is where I feel uncomfortable. So I can imagine for you, it's quite similar with having to ask, "Can I read your lips?" And can you please be in like a quiet room and so on. I think it's different but very similar.
Yeah, I don't know whether you have any sort of similar experiences like that, Brian, or what else has been said.
Yeah, so it's a little different for me. I mean, I have a physical disability. I was born without my left hand, so I wear a prosthesis. So in the past, when I walk into an interview, it's very clear to them what my disability is. They look at me, they see me wear a prosthesis, or sometimes I'm not wearing it, like right now. But for recent times, I mean, I just started my job at Activision a couple months ago, so everything's been done over Zoom, over webcam, and whatever. So because it's not as obvious, I've been telling people, like, hey, just want to make it clear, I do have a disability that if we were in person in any different circumstance, you would see it clearly. So like you would probably be asking me questions. So I'm just gonna, instead of making it not weird for them, but making it a surprise for them, like a year down the road when the pandemic is over and we go to the office and they're like, oh, we never knew. Like we could have been talking about your needs or whatever. I've been on that side where I've been telling them straight up, like, hey, this is what I have. This is, this is my disability. It doesn't necessarily affect my work that much, but I'm letting you know in case, you have any questions, so on and so forth. And for the interview process and for the inclusion in or at Raven specifically, it's been super great. One of the first questions they actually asked me when I told them, like, hey, I have a disability, I wear prosthesis, that doesn't really stop me from gaming, but I'm also a big accessibility advocate. They're like, that's amazing. You want to join our accessibility team? And then now I'm an admin on the accessibility team. So it's
Nice.
it's pretty, yeah, if there's one thing I could say that like made that experience awesome for me in their like inclusion and they're just being accommodating to my needs and wanting to hear my feedback about my disability, like that's one of the greatest things I've experienced.
It's been the same thing with me at my new job at Next. Everyone's been amazing, and everyone is really eager to hear what I have to say about accessibility, but also eager to make sure that I don't feel uncomfortable and that I have everything that I need. And I can't say enough about how amazing everyone there has been. This has been like, I don't know what I expected, but it's been amazing.
I guess that's sort of a good follow-on question to be about, I guess, you know, the workplace attitudes towards disabilities and how, I guess, you know, you think the current climate of like co-workers feel when it comes to like a new person starting who may have a disability or maybe be neurodiverse, you know. Do you think that generally the, you know, acceptance is there, or do you think there's generally a barrier maybe between us because they don't know what to say or do?
Depends on the company, I would say. I've definitely been in companies where it's been awful and where I've been afraid to say that I need help, or I've been afraid to say that something isn't right. And anyone who knows me, and I feel like you guys don't even know me, but you probably figured out I'm not afraid to say what I think. So imagine someone like me being in a position where I'm afraid to say I need help. So it's been amazing at my new job at Next to have the opposite of that, where everyone is just so eager and willing to help, and I don't feel at all like I have to hide anything or that I have to, you know, worry that if I ask for something that's going to be seen as like negative or taking up resources or anything, compared to one place where I was, where it definitely felt like anytime I needed help that, you know, they were keeping a list of like times that Felicia was having difficulties, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely would say it's gotten better too. I mean, it's still for sure depends on the companies you work for, but for instance, like where I'm at now, I haven't really met anybody else that has a disability yet. I mean, this is a massive company, but they've been so open about, you know, getting feedback or reaching out to those that do, so that we can, you know, have that data for what we're working on. Whereas like the previous company I worked at, this wasn't even on their mind until I joined the team and they saw it physically in front of them. They were like, oh, that's a thing. You are having trouble playing a game that we developed and we have you testing. We should probably start thinking about that. Which is, again, like so different from now, where it's like I joined a team where they have been so open to, you know, being accommodating to the people that play the games and work on the games.
That's great. Yeah, it's great to hear that. You know, I guess it's kind of a thing of like having good and bad experiences, like depending on where you are. And it's hard. Like I think, you know, it's hard to sort of be vocal about maybe difficult, like you said, Felicia, about like sort of almost having a, you know, that paranoia that they've got a list that they're writing down every single time that you know, raised your voice and gone, this is too hard or this needs to be changed. It's like, oh, they're being difficult, we'll try and get rid of them.
Yeah. I think that's the sort of like the biggest fear, is that if you do speak up too much, that they will, like, not at my current company, I want to clarify, but in previous times it's been the case that like you feel like if you do speak up too much, then they might try to find a reason to get rid of you, and then obviously they can't let you go for being disabled, but then you worry they'll find a different reason and just, you know, come up with something, and it's really hard to prove. And I think that's something that's really been difficult for me in the past, is to kind of really know when people are criticizing something I've done because I actually did not do it to the best of my ability, or they've criticized, for example, or they don't think I'm fit for a role because maybe I don't have the skill set, versus do I actually have the skill set, but they're so concerned about my disability that they're not giving me the opportunity. I made a post about this on LinkedIn back in the summer because I was living in Helsinki city center for a short time and I was using a cane, which is something I rarely do. But I started using the cane. I started taking selfies with the cane, and it kind of hit me when I was taking cane selfies that I've been giving accessibility lectures for the past 5 years and going up on stage in front of the entire Finnish game industry to tell everyone that, hello, I'm disabled. And now I'm looking for a new job. So the entire Finnish game industry pretty much already knows that I'm disabled. Oops. So that was scary. And I read about this on LinkedIn, and I had someone reach out to me and was like, it's maybe not a good look to post things like that because it makes it sound like you're bitter. It makes it sound like you're finding reasons for why you might not be just skilled enough for the role. And I was like, I get that. I get how a non-disabled person could see that and think that that's what I'm saying. But at the same time, I would hope that there would be some sort of level of empathy from non-disabled people that would understand that, like, this is the worry that I think we will always have. And the only way to really calm that worry is to just change society's attitudes and change society's behavior.
Laura, do you feel that you're finding your voice when it comes to sort of addressing needs and, you know, sort of, I guess, almost like standing up for yourself if you needed to?
I think I'm just learning the importance of that now, because I think working during the pandemic and just like having like initially starting off in the office when I was at 505 2 years ago, and then the pandemic hit last year. It's one of the most jarring things I'd ever experienced, and it was just really tough. It was just like really stressful. I got really like mental fatigue, and it was just like really emotionally taxing on me. Just like trying to like adjust to like that new like work from home system, and that's when I kind of like realised the needs and how important it is to address that, because I think beforehand in the office, I think the reasonable adjustments were already in place. It wasn't a loud office; it was a relatively quiet one, and I think that's just the thing. Really, just like with the current situation at the moment, and just like trying to like adjust to that. That's been like the challenge.
I don't know whether you others will feel that maybe life is a bit different at the moment. Obviously, with like lockdown and remote working, you know, it's pretty not more normalized. A lot of companies probably will seek to sort of stay remote. You know, how do you think this affects you then in terms of your potentially your disability, or maybe other disabled developers now that we're sort of, you know, separate but together?
I think it will probably like change like everything after the pandemic's over. I think it will change things forever, really. I think there'll probably be a lot more like variety and a lot more options and a lot more flexibility, and I think flexibility is kind of what's needed, really.
I agree with Laura. I think that actually in some ways the pandemic is a terrible thing for disabled people, but on the other hand, it's an amazing thing for disabled workers who work in fields that can be work from home, because a lot of my physical disability, being blind, is noticed when I'm at a computer if you're next to me. So how I use a computer can sometimes be a bit jarring for someone who is not blind to watch. I got bullied for it in high school, for example. And my coworkers at my previous jobs who've worked with me in person all got used to it. But in the beginning, I know it was super weird for them to watch me. But being home, no one has to watch that except for me. So I feel empowered in that sense. And I think a lot of people in similar situations might have found this kind of safety and confidence in how they work that they might not have necessarily had while they were at the office. I'm actually way more productive at home, I think.
Yeah, it's to me, it's almost like a tale of two cities, because with the pandemic and remote working, it actually was kind of got worse for me. I'm more suited to being in an office where someone's right next to me. You know, the nearer they are, easier it is for me to hear. And because I'm so now reliant on technology, you know, I've got to, you know, we've got to make sure everybody's internet connection's great, their audio's great, that they've all got great mics and cameras, and, you know, and it's just like if one link in the system is gone, then the whole chain falls apart, and it's kind of like it's stressful. It's stressful for someone who's hard of hearing to be like, you know, I'm relying on you to equip yourself with a good mic and a good, you know, a good headset maybe to hear me. And, you know, not a lot of people will, I guess, think about that when they're sort of investing in their own home office, because you're so reliant on going to an office where everything's provided for you that, you know, when it actually comes back to you're relying on your co-workers now to be the accessible ones as possible, individually rather than as a company. I don't know how everybody else finds that, and that responsibility now on your co-workers to be accessible and be the accessible office.
Yeah, I think I'm just bouncing off what you just said there. I think just that even like being on the autistic spectrum, really, I think because I think the difficult thing about working from home for me is that you just don't have that support system there, and it's just like you don't have people to like bounce off really, and just all the problems that can be solved in like a short amount of time probably take longer, and you have to like detour around them really.
I don't know how you find it, Brian, because you're in quite a large company, to still feel a part of a company. When if you are remote working yourself, I'll be interested to know, what's it like to sort of, I guess, almost trying to fit in as part of the team when the team's massive, but is also everywhere.
Yeah, I was gonna tag on a bit to what Laura just said. It's very similar, where it's like, yeah, you don't have that support group in person. Everything is done over video. So even for someone that isn't disabled, that increases the amount of time. If you just start at a company, it increases the amount of time it takes to train you. So just imagine what it would be like for somebody that is disabled, that does need more accommodation in office, how much more difficult it is to do that remotely as well. It's just kind of a lot to deal with, which is, I understand a lot of what we're talking about here and how the companies handle it. For Activision specifically, in my experience, it's been really great. How they've been helping me. They've been sending me all the equipment I've needed pretty quickly too. Most things come by like overnight if I need them. And then in terms of like feeling like part of the team, it's definitely an odd one, because I haven't met anybody in person yet. Everything's been over the webcam, which is great in a sense, because like Felicia was saying, I'm comfortable being home, and I feel a little more confident being in my own space and being able to do my own thing without the worry of people like looking over their shoulder at me or whatever, because you would get that at any other place that you work at. But at the same time, going to what Laura was saying too, there's the support system, and being in person, you don't have to, it's kind of a catch-22, or like you were saying, a tale of two cities. You don't have to constantly remind people of like, hey, I need accommodation for this, I need accommodation for this, because it's being right next to them, it's more top of mind for them.
I think being blind. Oh, I'm sorry. Continue. I didn't realize you were
just to finish what I was going to say real quick is a lot of people forget that I have one hand because you don't see it on camera. So I actually like changed my icon on Slack or what have you, or Zoom, so that it shows like a picture of me with my prosthesis. So I try to make it a little more, visible so that they remember. But yeah, it's definitely an odd situation there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think being blind, maybe my situation is different than other disabilities, because and also because I'm a community manager, I do PX, but my background is mostly in community management. So I am used to all of my friends existing inside of the internet. So for me, onboarding virtually just feels like I've started moderating another Reddit community. It doesn't feel any different. And everyone, I think, this week has been kind of shocked about how fast my onboarding has gone, but I think a lot of it is just because I'm so used to doing everything online, all of my friends being online, all of my colleagues from different communities being online, that it's been easy for me because I feel the most confident online. I've become already like the second meme lord of our company Slack, for example. And I am just an internet geek. So for me, this has been super easy, and I don't feel like I have to constantly remind anyone, because I feel like being behind the computer, it's less obvious than if I would be at the office, if that makes any sense. And now that everything is done virtually, all the notes are written down, not by me in Slack. All the slides are made by, like everything is already there and already written and already in fonts, not handwriting. So, and not on whiteboards that I would have to physically walk up to and put my face against if I wanted to see. So there's just so much that makes me feel like I'm emperor of the world as a blind person working from home. But I definitely understand how other people might not see it that way. But I'm loving it.
I guess then would be how we take that attitude and that confidence and, the things that have gone well as a remote workers, etc., when it all goes back to office or, we may, join back together again. It's sort of, I guess, what's the advice you could give to the company to sort of keep the ball rolling and build that confidence?
Let people have the hybrid option. I think the hybrid option is going to be kind of the ideal going forward. And I think that any company that doesn't do the hybrid thing is going to be left in the dust.
Yeah.
And to explain to our viewers at home what the hybrid option is?
Sorry. Hybrid is doing part-time at the office, part-time at home. And how that part-time is coordinated would obviously depend on the team, on the company, on the project. But I think having the option that, I don't think basically any company after this is going to be 5 days, 40 hours a week at an office anymore.
I did want to touch upon a sort of a common thing for industry people is events and networking. Obviously, a lot of that has basically gone online, digital ones, if any. So when we actually can go back to physical events and meet up again, what do you think the situation for disabled developers is going to be? Is it going to be back to the same old, or is it going to be a new positive attitude towards people with disabilities at these events?
I have so much pent up energy from the past year that I think I'm going to be the first one at every single karaoke line. Is all I have to say. I am like, I am ready.
My hope is that with the pandemic, like I absolutely miss these events too. I would go to almost everyone because I love talking to people and telling them about how amazing game dev is. I mean, everybody's heard horror stories, but there's so much love and passion in there too. And like, that's what I love going to these events for. But I really hope if one thing could change, that they dual present their panels, like similarly to like the GA Conf is doing now. Is there are these live stream panels and people can watch them online, and there's the VOD on YouTube afterwards. If more conventions could do that, that'd be great. I know it's a little different because with them, they try to get people in the door, and that's the way they get people in the door. But I mean, I don't know, charge a fee to watch them online too. Like that's one way you can still make your money and have people that need access or want access to these panels or talks. GDC does the same thing.
I agree.
Just doing those with PAX, or even, I know E3 doesn't have as many panels, but PAX and other events like that.
Yeah, like it's interesting of the hybrid option again that comes in of like sort of give people options is kind of the best thing you can.
It's the greener way too, isn't it? Like we're thinking more and more about climate change and everything like that, and I think the hybrid option is also more logical for the climate, especially if you think about people up here from the Nordics. Like basically the whole Nordic game industry flies to San Francisco for a week and then flies back. That's a lot of flights and a lot of greenhouse gases for stuff that could now, we've proven, be done online. So
I don't know how you feel, Laura, as someone who's neurodiverse, when we go back to physical events and meeting up with crowds of people, what do you hope that the new situation would potentially create? Are we going to be more, I don't want to say empathetic, compassionate, more accessible, maybe?
I think accessibility is important, but I think like in regards to like events and stuff, I think for like autistic people in general, to sort of have like a sensory room, because like the autism show, which is, it's not a gaming related event, that sort of like have like little sensory areas. So I think just like introducing stuff like that really, and just like quiet areas, and just like things like even that sort of like stands and stuff, like sort of like people are like having like hearing impairments or vision impairments just have like the reasonable adjustments in place there as well.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of events that have that breakaway space that you can just get
Yeah.
away from the humbug and the noise and everything, and
Yeah.
you know, actually have that quiet word with someone that you sort of pull out from the crowd. Hey, I need to talk to you. But yeah, I guess we could go on to sort of the final point of actually, you know, what we hope for the future, and you know, maybe bits of advice that we can give to, you know, potential other disabled devs, or you know, the next generation of disabled developers and neurodiverse developers. You know, because things aren't perfect, but they are getting better. But you know, I guess I prefer it to you guys of you know, what advice would you give and what do you hope to see for the future?
Stand up for yourself, because no one's going to stand up for you. Is all I can say. I would say I wish I would have learned that when I was 20 and not when I'm 30, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice I can
Yeah,
give,
absolutely.
to go back to what Felicia said earlier, is continue to be loud. I mean, there has been change that has happened over the past couple years, and it's just been getting better and better, and it's only going to get better if we continue to be vocal about it and to keep speaking up. Just within the past year or two, I've seen so much growth in this industry, not just in accessibility in games, but accessibilities in the actual development studios, in the events, and the event halls. Like, none of this would have happened if we didn't speak up about it. So if we continue to be loud, it's gonna just continue to get better.
Loud and proud.
I think. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Laura.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I definitely agree with what Felicia just said. Really, just like not being afraid to stand up for yourself and just like calling things out if things aren't right, and just yeah, I think that's what I've got to add really.
Yeah, I echo that. Unfortunately, it took me to like the age of 30 before I gained that confidence to be able to sort of speak up for myself and defend myself as well, in terms of like if I was struggling, basically because of a disadvantage that not many people have, and it's that sort of the same echo, for people to don't worry about that, or how they think that that negativity that can be associated with disabilities might come back on them because they're voicing their opinions, and they're that sort of scared of like, oh, if I say I'm struggling, and then they're going to be like, oh well, that's what we get for hiring somebody who is XYZ.
But I think we've all been through that at school. At least I have, and I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Like, I think a lot of this worry and why it takes us so long after school to find ourselves is that we've all have that trauma and that history of mistreatment and being misunderstood and being misjudged from society and from school and from the adults in our life from a very young age. And at least for me, it took actually meeting Ian, who brought us all together, but also, just finding my place as an adult in a foreign country, because I'm American originally, and really being out on my own and finding myself. It took a long time to realize that I'm not broken, society is. And when you start looking at it from that perspective, it's this whole other level of freedom that just lets you, for the first time, I would say ever, properly live.
Yeah, I like that.
I definitely want to add on to that too. Similar to what everybody said, I was very shy about it and definitely not confident about my disability and speaking out about my disability and the accommodations I need and people with similar disabilities like me need, until I found a community that was, also vocal about it, like, the community here or other charities I work for. And it helped me realize that, yeah, I can be vocal about it. And even if I don't feel it at the moment, people are hearing me, and people will always be hearing me. And one thing that we can make clear, or I feel like we can make clear now, just being in this panel, is there are people on the inside that will be hearing you and will be fighting for you. So that's definitely helpful to know too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's really nice to hear. Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that there are people in the industry already who have a disability or are neurodiverse, that they may be not as loud and vocal as us, but they're still shaping the industry for the better. And, that they're ready to sort of welcome you almost. But yeah, if anybody's got any final points they'd like to make, feel free to speak up now or forever hold your peace.
I've said enough today.
Yeah. I think just bouncing off what the guys just said. I think I'm always sort of like at the realization I'm always going to sort of like have like this uphill battle with like my disabilities and like in the workplace as well.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that point. And it's a life journey almost sometimes, isn't it? And hopefully, because we've gone down the path, and hopefully the sort of person behind us will have an easier time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that pretty much covers it for our panel today. So I'd just like to thank you all again for taking the time to come and speak about your experiences and impart some knowledge and wisdom to the GA conference crowd that will be watching. Just imagine it's just a giant theatre with massively filled and over the film of everybody watching.
Yeah.
I believe that we will be in the discourse for the Games Industry Conference. So if you've got any questions in the audience, then feel free to sort of chime up in there. I'm sure we'll be happy to answer if you've got any questions from this panel. So I'd like to, from all of us, I will say, thank you for watching. And so continue for the rest of the conference. We'll all learn more. So let's all wake up. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.